From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Immigration raids and Colorado's construction industry. An estimated 13% of the construction workforce in Colorado is made up of immigrants without legal status. They often do lower-paying jobs at construction sites that get the project moving.
Drywall installers, brick masons, general construction laborers, important but lower paid jobs on the construction site.
That's Chloe East, an associate professor of economics at the University of Colorado, Denver. She studies how the workforce, and especially the construction workforce, can be affected by detention and deportation. Colorado is a state with a housing shortage, which made us wonder what's likely to happen to Colorado's construction industry as the Trump administration imposes sweeping deportation policies and threatens mass raids. So we reached out to Chloe for answers. She's been investigating the economic impacts of detaining and deporting immigrants without legal status since Trump first took office in 2016.
When mass deportations start to pick up in a local area, thousands of fewer homes are built as a result, and the prices of homes in that local area rise by as much as 10% in the following years.
The first Trump term saw a lot of rhetoric around deportations, but really fewer actual deportations than under the Obama administration. Could you talk about how intense rhetoric versus actual deportations affect workers without status?
This is an important point for sure, because the research has also shown that the rhetoric itself, even without the action, actually has big impacts for the labor market and for the construction sector specifically. So in my research, we show that in addition to people being deported and detained, which obviously has an impact on the labor market, that there's a big chilling effect as a result of mass deportations, and there was a big chilling effect as a result of Trump's rhetoric as well. This has an impact even on people who remain in the U.S. and even on people who they themselves might not be eligible for deportation, but maybe they are married to somebody who is eligible for deportation or live with somebody who's eligible for deportation. So every activity that they do becomes riskier when the threat of deportation is higher. We see that immigrants work less outside the home, even when there's just a heightened perceived risk from rhetoric.
What kind of stories did you hear about that?
Well, I think part of it is because there's a lot of confusing information and misinformation out there. So it's really hard for people to understand what the actual risk of deportation is. In the first Trump administration, there were a lot of immigration enforcement activities that were, I would say, intended to create fear and were not actually that effective in terms of deporting lots of people. Basically, immigration raids, which we've seen in the second Trump administration as well.
Right.
And while these raids actually don't end up deporting that many people, usually a handful of people at most, they are very splashy. They make a lot of news and they create a lot of fear in the immigrant community and lead to more sort of confusion and misinformation. And that really affects whether immigrants are willing to work outside the home because they feel that the risk associated with that is much higher since they or somebody they know might be deported.
And I'm curious about the impact of this on the construction industry as well. I know that you tend to talk to a lot of employers for your research. What kind of anecdotes are you hearing from them?
We've already heard just in the first month of the Trump administration that here in Colorado, there has been an increase in immigrants not showing up for work, especially following the highly publicized raids that happened in Denver in the last couple of weeks.
What could this mean for the cost of housing over the next 4 years?
Politicians in the Trump administration have been promising the American public that mass deportations will help solve the housing crisis. I think it's very clear from decades of economic research that that is not true. If anything, mass deportations are going to exacerbate the housing crisis because immigrants are so crucial to the construction industry, including here in Colorado. Without immigrant workers to help build new homes, we're going to be stuck in this place of not having enough homes for people in Colorado and continue to see the prices go up as a result.
What does that look like for the larger economy? I mean, what is the effect on Colorado's economy if this entire industry slows because the immigrant workforce leaves or just stops participating in the economy?
Economists have shown for a really long time now that immigrants, including unauthorized immigrants, are a net positive for the US economy, and that deporting immigrants and detaining immigrants is harmful to the economy. So we expect to see that GDP growth is going to slow down, and potentially, depending on the magnitude of the deportations, that it may even lead to a recession.
Chloe, do you have any insights on how the construction industry is preparing for these possible shakeups?
I can tell you what we know from the past, which is that while we might hypothesize that construction firms will raise wages in order to attract US-born workers to these jobs that are left behind by unauthorized immigrants when they're deported, that does not really bear out in the data. We really don't see a lot of evidence that employers raise wages in order to attract US-born workers. So I think it's an open question whether that will be something they use this time, but that's not what we've seen in the past.
Chloe, as you have watched what's happening in this national conversation around detention and deportation, is there anything that has surprised you in recent weeks?
One thing that I think is important to understand around the broader conversation around immigration in the US is there's been a lot of discussion recently about immigrants as criminals and the criminal history of immigrants. I think it's really important to know that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than US-born people as a whole, and that even deportation policies that are supposed to be targeted at people who have criminal histories end up impacting a much broader part of the community. For example, in the policy that I've studied, Secure Communities, that was supposed to be a targeted program, 20% of the people who were deported had no criminal history before they were deported.
Wow. And the Secure Communities program you mentioned, that was a program that was developed during the Bush administration and implemented during the Obama administration?
That's right. So I don't know if surprising is the right word, but that's another part of the conversation I think deserves some separation of the rhetoric from the facts.
Chloe East is Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Colorado, Denver, who studied the effects of mass deportations on the construction industry. If you have thoughts or questions about this conversation or any of our previous episodes, send us an email at noco@kunc.org. That's NOCO@kunc.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.